Hi folks, this is all the fruit, and let me tell you, basil is an incredible spice. I love it. You can find nowadays basil varieties in all different, in a lot of different tastes. However, I still prefer the normal one that tastes like basil. Well, when I was a teenager, my mom used to cultivate a lot of basil and prepare most salads with basil. And yeah, then once I wanted to use basil too. It was one of... Oh, well, let's enjoy the beautiful church for a couple minutes. Or for a couple seconds, because it's so loud. Okay. Well, I wanted to make burek. I think it was the first time. My mom didn't have time, but I really want burek, which in Bulgaria is called banica. What is banica or burek? Basically, you take flat. Basically, it's like an Oriental lasagna with, in our case, usually with eggs and cheese, and sometimes some green stuff. Other people use meat, and you can use basically everything else. Well, I thought, how can I spice up my eggs and cheese lasagna? And I thought, well, let's take some basil, but it was winter. So I thought my mother must have dried basil somewhere. And I found, whole dried plants lying around somewhere in a plastic bag, and I took them. I used the dried leaves, and I also used, or I mostly used, the fruit, because there were not many leaves left on those plants. Well, they tasted a little bit tough, but they had a wonderful basil flavor. Basically, I would put all this stuff in the burek or lasagna, or in Malta you call the stuff pastici, in Bulgarian banica. So yeah, I just put them into a dish to spice it up. Wow. This variety tastes of anise seed, but the ones my mother had the original basil flavor. I liked it so much, I made that dish like a couple more times. I would make like 30-40 small banicas or small pastici if you are Maltese, and would freeze them. And I made this like 2 or 3 times, and then suddenly my mom said, "You have been using all my basil seeds." I said, "What?" "Yeah, I've been using the dried basil." "Yeah, but those were my seeds for last year." So she basically didn't remove the seeds, she just dried the whole plants and put them in a plastic bag. And I found out that, basically dried basil leaves, also dried parsley or dried dill, all those green leaves, when you dry them, they are not so tasty. Dried basil leaves in winter, they taste kind of boring compared to the fresh basil leaves in summer. However, those fruits, when I baked them together with, when I baked them into those, you can basically describe them as little pies, egg and cheese pie. The whole stuff got a wonderful taste like with fresh basil. I think even with fresh basil you couldn't make this nice taste after you have everything for like 40-50 minutes in the oven. I think even then even the fresh basil would lose its taste. But the fruit, meaning the calyxes and the seeds together, made a really wonderful taste. The calyxes were still a tiny bit rough, but not so bad. I think most probably the taste came from the seeds, from the stored fats and from the stored etheric oils in the seeds. Those fresh ones, they taste similar to the leaves, but that year I learned that basically if you want basil in winter and if you want to cook it into pies, it's not too good to use the fresh stuff and the fresh leaves, but the dried fruit and the dried seeds. if you have enough dried basil seeds, winter is coming, you can try this stuff and tell me how are your experiences with basil fruit. I mean, sometimes I'm trying fruit of stuff which I know that the fruit are not normally used, but other plant parts, and then the fruit tastes usually disgusting or boring. But in this case, no, almost 30 years ago, I really made that experiment without knowing that it's an experiment, and it was surprisingly successful. Now let's sow them into the ground. Maybe we'll get a couple more basil plants next year. So folks, this was the basil, or how to use basil fruit, and how to use basil fruit to get a better taste than with basil leaves. Stay tuned for a lot more fruit videos from the beautiful city of Heidelberg. Here once more the church. And don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe.